Welcome back. Let's turn to our second canon of rhetoric, the next stage in the speech crafting process, which is arrangement. We've begun the initial process of brainstorming, making a selection of a topic, and kind of gathering all the things that we might say. Now we need to make a selection and arrange that selection into the most effective order. That's arrangement. Just like last speech, you're going to have three major parts to your speech, beginning with the introduction, then the body, and then the conclusion. For this speech, unlike last speech, speech number one, there are going to be four parts to your introduction. You will begin again with the attention getter. And I really want to encourage you to, be creative, have fun, take a risk to do something memorable with this attention getter for this speech. One piece of advice I'd give you would be to don't start at the very beginning with the broad general idea. Start from somewhere in the middle. And what do I mean by that? Let's say I'm giving my speech about the architecture of a particular building. If I was started with have you ever thought about what architecture is? Or have you ever thought about the various architectural styles of the building around you? That's just kind of a boring general question, and it's at the beginning, and it doesn't really get into kind of the heart of what the speech is about. So I would highly recommend that you don't ask a question and you don't ask a throwaway question as your attention getter for this speech. Try a little harder. Maybe if I was giving this speech, I might start with perhaps like a vivid description that puts my audience in a scene. Something like, I was standing at the foot of the Dome Cathedral in Cologne, and the first thing I noticed was how small it made me feel. It had these two towers that shot straight up into the sky, so high that I had to lean back just to see the tops. And the building wasn't smooth or simple. Everywhere I looked, it had pointed arches, sharp edges, and rows of these weird, strange, carved figures just staring down at me from above. And it felt less like a building and more like a mountain of stone built to pull your eyes upward. And after doing a little research on the style of its architecture, which is Gothic, I learned that building is doing exactly what Gothic architecture is meant to do: impress, overwhelm, and remind you of how small you are. Okay, so that's doing a lot of work there, and I think that's a good example of an attention getter for this speech. It would lead us then into our thesis statement, which is the main idea of our speech, and there's an upcoming assignment that will elaborate upon this. For the third part of the introduction that you'll need to have is the audience orientation, and you won't see this term in the textbook. But essentially what I'm talking about is making the speech relevant to the audience, and I want you to think about doing that in terms of how will this audience be able to put the information that you are talking about in your speech into action in their lives? What will they be able to do with this information? Just kind of saying they're going to passively learn some stuff, that's implied, right, with the speech. We know we're going to learn things. So you're going to learn about buildings, okay? Next time you go downtown, you're going to be able to identify the buildings downtown that have this style, or this example, if your speech was about local elections, you'll be able to confidently participate in them. That's a good audience orientation. For your ethos, I want you to make sure that you detail and highlight and name the best sources you have in your speech. You don't have to name them all in the ethos, but you definitely want to draw the audience's attention towards the best stuff you have, the most credible sources. In order to prepare for this speech, I consulted the scientific journal Nature, along with some other important sources of information. You can also include in this your personal experience, but it needs to be significantly different than the everyday lay person, common person experience. Saying, I'm going to be talking to you about the aesthetic design of a particular application on a smartphone, and your personal experiences that you've used the application, or you own a smartphone. That's not that informative. But let's say you're an app developer who has experience designing the aesthetics of applications. That would be probably worth mentioning. Preview statement is where you will preview in the order that they appear. You're going to announce the main points of the speech. First, I will discuss main point number 1. Then I'll turn to main point number 2. And finally, we'll wrap the speech up with main point number 3. So those are the 5 parts of the introduction that you will be graded on for this speech, as well as speech number 3. To continue on, the body of your speech for this speech should be built around 2 to 4 main points. And this is just an arbitrary choice. 2, 3, or 4. 5 starts to get a little complicated. I think 2 is kind of the unsung hero. Pretty simple, easy, 1, 2. 3 is the most common, I would say. 4, it's starting to get complicated, but that's okay. And it needs to be logically ordered, written in a clear and concise way, kind of like you would write the thesis statement of that section of the speech. And of course, it needs to be directly related to the thesis. It needs to be elaborating upon, unpacking the thesis. You could consider writing your main points in parallel structure. There's an upcoming lecture video that will talk about this idea, along with the different strategies that you can use: topical, chronological, spatial, cause and effect. And I believe I even added pro-con, and that doesn't show up here, but it will be discussed later, and it is in the prompt, pro-con as well. The conclusions of your speech need to have 3 main things. You need to signal the end so that the audience is psychologically prepared that the speech is wrapping up. This will help them tune in. And then you'll review the main points. If you have 2 main points, review the main points. Both of them. If 3, review 3. If 4, review 4. And consider including more detail than you did in the preview statement in the introduction, because you've now talked about it. So give us some of the salient, most important details. Make this more substantial than the preview. Finally, have a memorable end to the speech, kind of like the reversed attention getter. You want to leave us impressed, wowed, with something interesting, creative, memorable for the closure. You're going to use transitions and signposts between the major parts of the speech, between the introduction and the body, between the body and the conclusion, as well as between the body's main points. And there'll be an upcoming video about this. And then you will also need to assist your arrangement by writing an outline, drafting an outline that will organize it in a very visible way. You'll be creating a full sentence, full content outline for this speech, as well as speech number 3. And there'll be an upcoming video that will discuss this. We'll pick up in the next video with the remaining parts of the canons of rhetoric, the next 3 steps of the canon of rhetoric: style, memory, and delivery.